My son Mikey is diabetic, and we get his insulin from Canada.
How much do you figure that saves your family?
It'll save my family $250 a year.
But the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, has issued a serious warning that using Canadian drugs could be unsafe.
This is just the propaganda that's put out to make sure that Americans don't have access to cheaper drugs.
It may come as a surprise that the pharmaceutical industry is the most profitable business in the country. Americans pay far more for their prescription drugs than the citizens of any place on earth. It'll also come as no surprise that as a political issue, the high price of drugs has united both Republicans and Democrats. More than 1 million Americans now buy their medication in Canada, and it's no longer just older people taking buses across the border. Mayors and governors from Minnesota to Alabama are helping Americans get Canadian drugs by mail. Such purchases are technically illegal. So far, the government has declined to prosecute individual customers or the cities and states involved. But the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, has raised the specter of safety. And for more than a year, the FDA Commissioner, Dr. Mark McClellan, has been waging a campaign against Canadian importation. In these years, since Americans, for reasons purely of price, have been buying their drugs in Canada, how many incidents of harmful, unsafe drugs do you have?
We don't know.
You're making a case that they're unsafe, but nobody says how unsafe or how common the problems are for drugs that people buy.
Well, that's the problem. We don't know, because we don't have the authority to tell where these drugs have come from, or how they're, or to monitor closely how they're getting into the United States and to make sure that the drugs that come in are safe. It could be a widespread problem.
That's a lot of hooey. There is no reason that buying drugs in Canada is any less safe than buying them in the United States.
Dr. Marcia Angel was executive editor of the New England Journal of Medicine for 11 years. She's currently writing a book on the secrets of the drug industry.
The people who say you have to worry about the safety of drugs from Canada are imagining the way it was in the old days, that there's a moat around the United States, that drugs that are sold in the United States are made by only American companies and made in this country. It's not that way anymore. Pfizer, for example, has 60 manufacturing sites in 32 countries. So the drugs are made all over the world. They're sold all over the world.
Most of Pfizer's anti-cholesterol drug, Lipitor, is made in Ireland. The same Lipitor that's sold in both U.S. and Canadian pharmacies. Other familiar drugs like Zocor, Nexium, and Prevacid are the same Zocor, Nexium, and Prevacid sold in Canada. They're much cheaper there because the drug companies must abide by Canadian government price controls. The drugs that are sold in Canada often as little as half the price of the same drug in the United States. Drug companies still make a profit on those, do they not?
Oh, sure. Why else would they sell them in Canada? They're not charities. Of course they make a profit.
The U.S. is the only industrialized country without some form of control on the prices of drugs. The U.S. also accounts for more than half of the industry's profits. In order to keep those profits up, the drug companies have joined the FDA in trying to shut down imports from Canada. Canadian pharmacies are feeling the pressure. This one is just over the border. Americans account for 30% of its business. You're a little nervous about us mentioning the actual name of this pharmacy.
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, we've had several letters from the big multinationals certainly threatening to cut off the drug supply very explicitly if you are supplying medications to U.S. patients.
As plain as that?
As plain as that, absolutely.
This pharmacy supplies drugs to municipal workers in the city of Springfield, Massachusetts, through a program set up by former Springfield Mayor Michael Albano.
The major pharmaceutical companies are saying, we're going to limit our supply. What does that tell you? It tells you that they want to keep the artificially high prices in America. How brazen is that? It just boggles my mind that they can get away with this.
When Albano was faced with a budget crunch last year, he had to lay off firefighters, police officers, and teachers. By arranging for 3,000 city employees, retirees, and family members to buy Canadian drugs, the city can make substantial savings.
We can save anywhere from $4 to $9 million on an annual basis if I get everybody enrolled and everybody goes to Canada. And that's a huge amount of money right now. If I can save $9 million for my city and put it back, redirect it back into police and fire, into public education, it'll make a world of difference. So it's a huge savings.
And you do it for your own use?
I do it for my family's use. My son Mikey is diabetic, and we get his insulin and related products for diabetes from Canada.
How much do you figure that saves your family?
It'll save my family $250 a year because there's no copay, and it'll save the taxpayers who front 76% of the payment about $850 a year. So it's a rather substantial savings for my family and for the taxpayers of Springfield.
The FDA says importing drugs from Canada or buying your drugs from Canada is unsafe, could be unsafe.
The American public is not buying that safety issue. The fact is, it is getting insulting for the FDA to say that. I view myself as a responsible father, and I can tell you that I would not let my son inject insulin into his body 3 times a day if I thought there was a safety factor here.
Mayor Albano concedes that casually buying drugs on the internet could be risky, but says it was quite simple for him to check out his Canadian supplier and challenges the FDA to do the same thing.
The FDA has become a pawn for the pharmaceutical industry, that they are protecting those high profit margins. If the FDA wanted to put a plan together, similar to what we're doing in Springfield, that would be good for all Americans, they could do it in 15 minutes relative to safety. We get all our medications from certified, regulated pharmacies in Canada. It's no different than going to your neighborhood pharmacy, and it's the exact same medication.
It's not that difficult for the FDA to check out, I don't know, half a dozen Canadian pharmaceutical exporters, ensure the safety of the product, that it's as safe as any product leaving an American pharmaceutical.
Under current law, we don't have the authority to ensure the safety of foreign-produced, foreign-distributed drugs.
What would motivate the FDA, which is not in the business of profiting from drugs, to put out this alarm about Canadian drugs?
The influence of the pharmaceutical industry on our government is huge, and the FDA is a part of the executive branch of the government. And this is just the propaganda that's put out to do the drug companies' bidding, to make sure that Americans don't have access to cheaper drugs. Because then they'll come to know what's going on. And what's going on is that these drugs, while they're made by global companies all over the world, are sold in this country for about double what they're sold for everywhere else. And that they want to keep secret.
You and this agency have been accused of being more interested in protecting the profitability of the pharmaceutical industry than in protecting the health of average Americans.
Our interest is in protecting and promoting the health of the public.
Of course, the whole controversy over Canadian drugs would be moot if Republican Congressman Dan Burton of Indiana had his way. During the recent debate over the Medicare bill, he co-sponsored a provision that would have legalized bringing in Canadian drugs with safeguards. But Burton says he ran into 2 brick walls, the drug industry and the U.S. government.
This is a perfect example, in my opinion, of where a special interest, the pharmaceutical industry, has been able to manipulate the Congress and the government of the United States to their benefit and to the detriment of the American taxpayer and the American people.
Since 1999, the drug industry has given more than $45 million in political contributions, and it's spent hundreds of millions more on an army of more than 600 lobbyists to work its will on Capitol Hill. Congressman Burton says the new Medicare Act makes it clear the industry got its money's worth. How much money is in it for the drug companies in this new Medicare prescription drug benefit?
Billions and billions of dollars.
In the the new Medicare Act, the federal government is specifically prohibited from negotiating prices to drug companies.
Morley, that is unconscionable. The government of the United States negotiates prices in the Defense Department, in every area of government. And here we are going to spend billions and billions and billions and probably trillions of dollars on pharmaceutical products, and we cannot negotiate the prices with the pharmaceutical industry. That's just not right.
In December, surrounded by members of Congress, President Bush signed the new Medicare Act. Since 1999, these legislators have accepted more than $1.5 million in campaign contributions from people working in the pharmaceutical industry. President Bush alone has received more than $500,000. The new Medicare prescription drug benefit has been billed by some as a big victory for America's seniors.
You've got to be kidding me. Seniors, when they find out what's in that bill, are going to be very angry. The problem is they're not going to find out about it until after this next election.
In that prescription drug benefit, which really doesn't kick in for another 2 years,
right,
till 2006.
Right.
Will that in any way reduce the attraction of importing drugs from Canada, do you think?
Oh, I don't think so, because even when you talk about the discount cards and the other things, you're going to find that seniors are going to be paying, in many cases, more than they are paying for Canadian imports right now.
We contacted Bristol Myers Squibb, Pfizer, Merck, Wyeth, GlaxoSmithKline, and Eli Lilly. None of them would talk to us. We asked Dr. Angel about the case the industry invariably makes to justify drug prices. The industry says that without maintaining these high prices, it will cripple or seriously affect innovation and research into new drugs. Any validity to that?
None at all. This is a kind of blackmail. What they're saying is, don't mess with us. Let us charge whatever we want for our drugs. Otherwise, you won't get the miracles. And the truth is that they spend less on R&D than they make in profits, and far less than they spend on marketing, and they don't make that many miracles in the first place.
It should be said, however, that the drugs that we take have given us longer lives and better longer lives.
That is absolutely true. The problem is that we're no longer getting our money's worth.
The pharmaceutical industry is gouging the American consumer. There's no other conclusion one can draw. And why should we in this country have to pay the highest prices in the world? Why isn't the president doing something? Why isn't Congress doing something? Someone has to wage this battle, so we're prepared to do it here.
Political pressure is building. Congress now plans to reconsider legislation that would legalize Canadian drugs. As for Dr. Mark McClellan, he's leaving the FDA. He's President Bush's new head of Medicare and Medicaid.